The great chamber floated in the void between stars, a structure so massive that entire moons could have fit within its curved walls. Inside, beneath a dome that showed the spinning galaxy above, representatives from 847 civilizations gathered for what they called the consensus. This was not a meeting of equals. This was a gathering of predators deciding which prey to hunt next. High Arbiter Zekthar stood at the center of the circular platform, his 8 legs clicking against the crystalline floor as he moved. His species had evolved on a world where patience was survival, where webs caught food that flew too carelessly through the air. Now he spun webs of a different kind, trapping entire worlds in the silk of bureaucracy and conquest. His 4 eyes scanned the assembled representatives, reading the subtle shifts in posture and color that indicated agreement or dissent. "The survey is complete," Zekthar announced. His voice translated into 800 languages simultaneously by the machines that hummed in the walls. Sector 774 Alpha contains a Class M world in what the local species calls the Sol System. 3rd planet from its star. Water-rich. Nitrogen, oxygen. Atmosphere. Single, large moon. And most importantly, newly aware. A hologram materialized above the platform, showing a blue and green marble hanging in the darkness. Earth. The assembled representatives leaned forward, their various sensory organs focusing on the image. Some had eyes, some had thermal pits, some perceived through electromagnetic fields. But all of them saw the same thing. Opportunity. Population? Asked a delegate from the Vrax Collective, a being that looked like living crystal with thoughts that moved through its lattice structure like light through glass. "Approximately 8 billion, Zekthar replied. "Divided into roughly 200 nation-states. Though power is concentrated among 7 major powers, they have achieved chemical rocketry and have placed primitive satellites in orbit. They have also developed nuclear fission weapons, though their delivery systems are crude. Threats?" This question came from Commander Vale, a member of the warrior caste from Krynos VII. She was tall and angular, with skin that looked like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with an inner red light. Unlike most of the representatives in the chamber, Vale had actually fought in wars, real wars, before the Concordat had conquered or absorbed everything worth conquering. She did not trust easy victories. "Minimal," Zekthar said, and his mandibles clicked in what his species used for a smile. "They have fragmented military forces with no unified command. Their weapons are chemical and nuclear, both of which our shielding renders obsolete. They have no energy weapons, no quantum communications, no understanding of fold space technology. By our metrics, they are approximately 2,000 years behind our least advanced member species." The chamber filled with sounds of approval. Clicks, whistles, electronic pulses, and subsonic rumbles. This was what they had come to hear. Another easy conquest. Another world to add to the Concordat's endless expansion. But Vale did not make approving sounds. She stood silent, her glowing eyes fixed on the hologram of Earth. There was something about it that troubled her, though she could not name what. Perhaps it was the way the world seemed so fragile, so vulnerable, yet had somehow developed weapons capable of destroying itself. That spoke of a certain madness, or perhaps a certain courage. She was not sure which. "The protocol is standard," Zekthar continued. "We will deliver the ultimatum, 10 cycles to submit to integration, to open their governments and militaries to our oversight, to accept the guidance of more advanced civilizations. If they refuse, we will demonstrate our power by sterilizing their moon. If they continue to refuse, we will proceed with full pacification protocols." "Have we intercepted their communications?" asked another delegate. This one from a species that lived in the ammonia clouds of a gas giant and existed here only as a projection. "Yes, extensive radio and digital signals. They have been broadcasting for approximately 100 of their years. Our linguistic AI has already translated their major languages. We know their history, their culture, their military capabilities. We know everything we need to know. And what have we learned? Vale asked. She did not know why she was asking. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was the memory of her own world's conquest, centuries ago, when her ancestors had thought they understood their enemy and paid for that arrogance in blood. Zekthar's mandibles clicked with something like impatience. They are violent, fragmented, and primitive. They have fought thousands of wars among themselves. Their history is one of constant conflict over resources, territory, and ideology. They have developed weapons far in advance of their wisdom. To use them. They are, in short, exactly what we expected to find. A young species that will destroy itself if we do not intervene. Then, let them, Vale said quietly. The chamber fell silent. 847 civilizations, represented by their best and brightest, all turned to stare at the warrior from Krynos VII. Explain, Zekthar demanded. If they are so self-destructive, why waste resources conquering them? Let them burn themselves out. Return in a few centuries and claim an empty world. Because, Zekthar said slowly, as if explaining to a child, their system contains resources we need. Rare metals, water ice, and most importantly, strategic position. This sector borders the Vashtari expanse. If we do not claim it, someone else will. The consensus has decided, Earth will be integrated. The only question is whether they submit peacefully or require motivation. Vale said nothing more. She had learned long ago that the consensus always decided in favor of expansion. That was its purpose. That was why it existed. She returned her attention to the hologram of Earth and wondered if the beings down there knew what was coming for them. She wondered if they would fight, and if they did, she wondered what kind of fight they would put up. The vote was called. 847 civilizations raised their approval. Even Vale, bound by her oath to the Concordat, signaled her agreement. The decision was unanimous. As it always was, Earth was marked for conquest. 43 light-years away, on a world that did not yet know it had been condemned, Dr. Sarah Chen sat in front of a wall of monitors in the control room of the Arecibo 2 array. The original telescope in Puerto Rico had collapsed decades ago. But humanity had built a new one in the Australian outback, 3 times as large and 100 times as sensitive. It listened to the stars, searching for patterns in the chaos, hoping to find proof that humanity was not alone. Tonight, it had found something. Run it again, Sarah said to her assistant, a young man named Marcus, who had only been with the project for 6 months. His hands shook slightly as he entered the commands. He had seen the data. He knew what it meant, even if he did not want to believe it. The speakers crackled to life, filling the control room with sound. But it was not the random hiss and pop of cosmic background radiation. It was organized, structured. It rose and fell in patterns that were unmistakably artificial, and it was close, very close. Somewhere in the outer solar system, beyond the orbit of Neptune, something was broadcasting. Could it be one of ours? Marcus asked hopefully. Maybe a probe malfunction? Sarah shook her head. She had already checked. Every probe, every satellite, every piece of human technology in the solar system was accounted for, and none of them were in that location. None of them were transmitting on those frequencies. None of them existed. Get me General Webb, Sarah said quietly. Get me everyone. We need to make calls, but what do we tell them? We don't even know what we're hearing. Sarah looked at the waveforms dancing across her screens, the mathematical beauty of a signal that had traveled across the empty spaces between worlds. She thought about what it meant to detect technology where no technology should be. She thought about every science fiction story she had ever read, every nightmare scenario about first contact that ended badly for the primitive species. We tell them that we're not alone anymore, she said, and we tell them to prepare. The hours that followed were chaos. Phone calls to government officials who did not believe. Video conferences with scientists who demanded more data. Emergency meetings with military commanders who wanted to know if this was a threat. Sarah repeated her findings over and over until her voice went hoarse. Yes, the signal was real. Yes, it was artificial. Yes, it was in our solar system. No, she did not know what it was saying. No, she did not know its intentions. General Marcus Webb arrived at the facility just after dawn. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with gray haircut, military short, and eyes that had seen too many classified briefings to be easily surprised. But when Sarah showed him the data, when she played the translated signal through the array's most powerful processors, she saw something she had never seen before in a military officer. She saw fear. The signal was not a greeting. It was not an invitation to friendship or cultural exchange. It was a formal declaration, translated into every human language simultaneously, delivered with the cold precision of a legal document. You are hereby notified of integration proceedings under Concordat Protocol 774. Your species has been evaluated and found suitable for absorption into the galactic concordat. You have 10 cycles to submit to oversight and integration. Failure to comply will result in demonstration of force. Continued failure will result in pacification. This message will repeat until acknowledgement is received. 10 cycles, Webb said quietly. How long is a cycle? Sarah had already done the math. Based on the signal's temporal markers, she had an answer. About 30 Earth days. We have 300 days to decide. Decide what? Whether to surrender to aliens we've never met, whether to hand over our governments to some intergalactic empire. Webb's voice was rising now, anger replacing fear. This is insane. This has to be some kind of hoax. It's not a hoax, Sarah said. She pulled up another screen, showing gravitational readings from the outer system. We're detecting mass. A lot of mass. The signal is coming from a fleet of at least 50 ships, each one the size of an aircraft carrier. They're there, General. They're real. And they're waiting for our answer. Webb sat down heavily in one of the control room chairs. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he pulled out his phone and began making calls. Within hours, every major government on Earth knew the truth. Humanity was not alone. And humanity was in very serious trouble. The days that followed were a blur of emergency sessions at the United Nations, heated debates in parliaments and congresses, and frantic meetings between military leaders who had never imagined fighting a war beyond Earth's atmosphere. The world's major powers, who had spent decades competing and threatening each other, suddenly found themselves facing a common enemy. Russia, China, the United States, the European Federation, India, Brazil, and the African Union all sent representatives to form what they called the Terran Defense Council. But defense against what? Humanity had no idea what technologies the aliens possessed, what weapons they could bring to bear, or whether resistance was even possible. All they had was the signal, repeating endlessly, a countdown to Judgment Day. Sarah spent those days analyzing every fragment of data she could extract from the alien transmissions. She learned to recognize the patterns in their communications, the mathematical structures that underlay their language, and she learned something that made her blood run cold. The Concordat was not just threatening Earth, they were studying it. Every radio signal humanity had ever broadcast, every television show, every news report, every military transmission that had leaked into space for the past 100 years was being intercepted and analyzed. The aliens were watching humanity's old episodes of war documentaries. They were downloading human movies about nuclear apocalypse. They were reading human books about planetary extinction. They were learning how humans killed. And they were learning how humans died. Sarah thought about that as she drove home one night, exhausted after another 18-hour shift. She thought about what those aliens would see when they looked at humanity's broadcasts. They would see World War II. They would see Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They would see Vietnam and Iraq and all the countless smaller wars that humanity preferred to forget. They would see a species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of murder, and they would think they understood. Sarah laughed at that. A bitter sound in the darkness of her car. The aliens thought they knew humanity. They thought they could predict human behavior based on old television signals and archived military documents. They thought they had cataloged everything dangerous about the species called human. They had no idea what was coming. The translation chamber aboard the Concordat flagship hummed with activity as thousands of AI processors worked to decode humanity's broadcasts. The Concordat had perfected this process over millennia. They would absorb every piece of information a species had transmitted into space, analyze it for cultural patterns and military capabilities, and use that knowledge to craft the perfect integration strategy. Usually, it took a few cycles to process a century of broadcasts. For Earth, it was taking longer. Analyst Kriath, a being whose species perceived reality through complex chemical sensors, floated in a nutrient bath while reviewing the latest batch of translated materials. What the humans called television and movies. What the humans called entertainment. Kriath had analyzed thousands of species' cultural materials over its long career. This was different. This was disturbing. The humans were obsessed with their own extinction. Kriath brought up file after file. Movies about nuclear war. Movies about asteroid impacts. Movies about pandemics that wiped out civilization. Movies about alien invasions. Movies about robot uprisings. Movies about zombies, demons, elder gods, and things that had no name. The humans had imagined every possible way their species could end. And then they had filmed it, broadcast it, and apparently enjoyed watching it. Analyst Kriath. A voice interrupted through the translation chamber's communication system. High Arbiter Zekthar requests your presence in the strategic planning room. Kriath detached from its analysis station and flowed through the corridors of the flagship, its chemical sensors picking up the tension in the air. Other analysts were emerging from their chambers, all summoned to the same meeting. Something had changed. Something had worried the High Arbiter enough to call an emergency session. The strategic planning room was smaller than the consensus chamber, but no less impressive. Holographic displays covered every surface, showing real-time data from the scout ships observing Earth. Zekthar stood at the center, his 8 legs tapping an agitated rhythm against the floor. Commander Vale leaned against a wall, her red eyes fixed on one particular display. When Kriath entered, Zekthar gestured toward the hologram. "Tell them what you found," he commanded. Vale straightened and walked to the display controls. With a few gestures, she pulled up a series of human transmissions. "These are what the humans call video games," she said. "Interactive training simulations. We initially dismissed them as primitive entertainment, but further analysis suggests they may serve a military purpose." The display showed scenes from human games, soldiers fighting in ruined cities, spacecraft engaged in complex tactical maneuvers, commanders directing armies across planetary surfaces. But the details were what disturbed the assembled analysts. The tactics were sophisticated, the scenarios were brutal, and the humans who played these games numbered in the billions. "This one is called Call of Duty," Vale continued. "It simulates modern human warfare with extreme accuracy. Over 100 million humans have trained with this simulation. This one is called Halo. It depicts humans fighting against an alien alliance called the Covenant. 50 million users. This is Mass Effect. Humans saving the galaxy from synthetic intelligence. 40 million users. This is XCOM. Humans defending Earth from alien invasion. 20 million users." Kriath's chemical sensors detected alarm pheromones from the other analysts. "These are just games," someone said. "Recreational activities." "And, are they?" Vale challenged. "The humans have spent decades and billions of their currency units developing these simulations. They have trained entire generations to think tactically about warfare, about resource management, about fighting enemies with superior technology. They have imagined alien invasions so many times that they have developed standard tactical responses. Retreat to defensible positions. Use asymmetric warfare. Make every inch of territory cost the invaders blood. And they have transmitted all of this into space, where we can see it. Why would they do that? Krieth asked. Why broadcast their military strategies to potential enemies? Because, Zekthar said quietly, they didn't know we were listening. They thought they were alone. They thought they were just playing games and telling stories. They didn't realize they were creating a database of tactical responses to every threat they could imagine. Vale pulled up another set of files. And it's not just entertainment. Look at their military doctrine. Every major power on Earth has contingency plans for dozens of scenarios we would consider absurd. The United States has plans for zombie outbreaks. Russia has plans for alien invasion. China has plans for asteroid deflection. They have imagined so many ways to die that they have prepared for all of them. The display shifted to show human military installations. Missile silos, hidden in forests and deserts. Submarine fleets hiding beneath the oceans. Aircraft carriers prowling the seas. Space stations that could be weaponized. And everywhere, nuclear weapons. Thousands of nuclear weapons. Each one capable of turning a city into ash. We knew about their nuclear arsenal, an analyst said. Our projections showed it would be ineffective against our shields. Our projections were based on their launch capabilities, Vale said. But what if they don't launch them? What if they use them differently? Look at this. She pulled up a human movie called Armageddon. They imagine drilling into asteroids and detonating nuclear weapons inside them. Look at this one. Another movie, Independence Day. They imagine uploading viruses to alien computer systems. Look at this one. A third movie, Ender's Game. They imagine child commanders developing tactics that adult strategists would never consider. These are fictional scenarios, Zekthar said, but his voice lacked conviction. They prove nothing. They prove that humans think about warfare differently than we do, Vale said. We plan for victory. We calculate acceptable losses. We fight according to rules established over millennia. But humans? They plan for survival. They imagine worst-case scenarios and prepare for them. They don't fight to win. They fight to make sure the enemy loses. Krieth processed this information through its chemical analysis systems. Vale was right. Every piece of human entertainment, every book and movie and game, showed a species that was intimately familiar with loss. They had nearly destroyed themselves dozens of times. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. They had come so close to extinction that they had written about it, filmed it, and learned from it. Recommendation? Zekthar asked. Increase our fleet strength, Vale said immediately. Bring in reinforcements from the nearest Concordat worlds. Don't rely on the standard integration protocols. These humans are unpredictable. That would take time, an analyst protested. And resources. The consensus approved this operation based on cost efficiency. If we request additional fleet support, they will ask questions. Then let them ask, Vale said. I would rather explain excessive caution than report unexpected casualties. But Zekthar's mandibles clicked with displeasure. The consensus has spoken. We proceed as planned. Continue analysis of human transmissions, but focus on military capabilities, not cultural speculation. We are not afraid of their movies. The meeting ended. The analysts returned to their stations. But Krieth noticed that Vale did not return to her quarters. Instead, she stood in the observation deck, staring at the blue planet that hung in the distance. And Krieth wondered what the warrior saw when she looked at Earth. Fear? Respect? Recognition? On Earth, the Terran Defense Council had moved beyond panic and into something like grim determination. They could not win. Every strategic analysis said the same thing. Humanity had no defense against faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, or the overwhelming numerical superiority the aliens commanded. But General Marcus Webb had not become head of U.S. Space Force by accepting defeat. "Show me everything again," he said to the assembled analysts in the Pentagon's newly created Alien Threat Assessment Division. The screens lit up with data. Gravitational readings from the outer system. Analysis of the alien transmission. Spectral analysis of the ships. Radio intercepts. And everything humanity had learned in the past 2 months. "They're studying us," Webb said. "They're intercepting our broadcasts, learning our languages, analyzing our culture. That means they want to understand us before they attack." "Why?" "Why?" "Standard military doctrine," one analyst suggested. "Know your enemy." Or standard colonization doctrine, another said. "Know what you're absorbing." Webb paced the room, his mind racing. What have we sent into space? What have they learned about us? 1. Everything, Dr. Sarah Chen said. She had been brought in as a special consultant, the woman who had first heard the alien signal. Every radio transmission, since the 1,920 seconds, every television broadcast, every satellite signal. We've been screaming into space for 100 years. They've heard it all. Including military transmissions? Some. Most military communications are encrypted, but metadata is still visible. Troop movements, weapons tests, military exercises. They know where our bases are. They know our chain of command. They know our weapons. Webb stopped pacing. What else do they know? Entertainment? News? Internet content? Sarah nodded. Everything that's ever been broadcast or transmitted wirelessly. Movies, television, video games, social media. The entire human internet has been leaking into space since the 1,990 seconds. Then they know how we think, Webb said slowly. They know our history. They know our wars. They know every military strategy we've ever used. Yes, Sarah confirmed. But General, that might not be a bad thing. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. She pulled up her tablet and connected it to the main display. Images began to appear. Movie posters. Game covers. Book titles. They've learned our military history, Sarah said. World War II. Vietnam. Iraq. Afghanistan. They know how we fight conventional wars, but they've also intercepted this. She highlighted a movie poster for Alien. And this. War of the Worlds. And this. The Terminator. And this. The Matrix. Science fiction. Someone said dismissively. That's not real. No. Sarah agreed. But it's how we think. It's how we prepare. We've spent 70 years imagining alien invasions and robot uprisings and every possible doomsday scenario. We've written books about it. Made movies about it. Created military simulations about it. We've trained billions of people to think tactically about threats that don't exist yet. See. Ass. Webb's eyes widened as he understood. We've been preparing for this. Without knowing it, yes. We've imagined first contact scenarios thousands of times. We've written about the mistakes species make when they meet aliens. We've depicted alien invasions from every possible angle. And we've always shown humans finding a way to survive. But those are just stories, an analyst protested. Stories that reflect our values, Sarah countered. Stories that teach us how to think. The aliens are analyzing our military capabilities, but they're not analyzing our psychology. They don't understand that we're a species that plans for the worst. They don't understand that we've been expecting them. Webb turned back to the displays. So, what do? We still can't beat them in a straight fight. No. Sarah agreed. But we might not have to. If they're studying our transmissions, they know we have nuclear weapons. They know we have biological weapons. They know we've fought wars that nearly destroyed our own civilization. So we make them believe we're crazy enough to do it again. Mutually assured destruction, Webb said quietly. Cold War doctrine. Exactly. We can't win, but we can make winning too expensive. We show them that conquering Earth will cost them more than it's worth. How do we do that? Someone asked. Sarah smiled. But it was not a happy expression. It was the smile of someone who had looked into the abyss and decided to jump. We give them exactly what they expect from their analysis of human history. We show them what desperate humans are capable of. We show them that we would rather die free than live as slaves. General Webb looked around the room at the assembled military leaders and analysts. He saw fear in their faces, but also determination. They were Americans, Russians, Chinese, Europeans, representatives from every major power on Earth. They had spent their careers preparing to fight each other. Now they had to work together to fight something far worse. Draft a response to their ultimatum, Webb said. Make it clear. We reject their integration. We reject their oversight. And if they attack, we will defend ourselves with every weapon we possess. That's suicide. Someone said. Maybe, Webb agreed. But it's our choice. That's the point. They want to take away our right to choose our own future. We're telling them that's not acceptable, no matter the cost. The message was drafted, edited, and approved by every member of the Terran Defense Council. It was transmitted toward the alien fleet on every frequency humanity could generate. It was short, simple, and translated into the same mathematical language the aliens had used. We have received your ultimatum. We reject it. Earth will not submit to foreign oversight or integration. If you attack, we will defend ourselves. We cannot defeat you, but we will make you pay for every inch of this world. We are human. We bow to no one. The transmission was sent, and then humanity waited to see what would happen next. Aboard the Concordat flagship, High Arbiter Zekthar read the human response, and his mandibles clicked with something between amusement and irritation. They were defiant. They were foolish. They were typical of young species that did not yet understand their place in the galaxy. They refuse, he announced to the gathered commanders. Begin demonstration protocols. Destroy their moon. But Commander Vale stepped forward, her hand raised. High Arbiter, I must protest. The analysis is not complete. We do not fully understand. We understand enough, Zekthar interrupted. They are primitive, violent, and irrational. The consensus has authorized this operation. The moon will be sterilized as a warning. If they continue to refuse, we will proceed with full pacification. That is the law. Vale wanted to argue. She wanted to point out all the things that troubled her about this species. Their obsession with extinction scenarios. Their preparation for threats that should not exist. Their willingness to imagine the worst and plan for it. But she was a soldier. And soldiers followed orders. As you command, High Arbiter, she said quietly. The order was given. The fleet began to move. And Earth's 10 cycles of grace came to an abrupt end. The alarm systems at every major observatory on Earth screamed warnings simultaneously. The alien fleet had stopped waiting. They were moving, accelerating inward from the outer system toward the inner planets, toward Earth, toward the moon. General Webb received the notification at 3 a.m. He had not been sleeping anyway. Nobody in the Terran Defense Council had slept much since sending their rejection. They had known this was coming. They had prepared for it. But knowing and experiencing were two different things. Time to lunar orbit? Webb asked the controller. At current speed, 6 hours. But sir, they're not heading for Earth. They're heading for the moon. Webb felt his stomach drop. The aliens had said they would demonstrate their power. Apparently, they meant it literally. Get me the council. Get me everyone. And activate Protocol Pandora. Protocol Pandora was humanity's desperate contingency plan. It had been developed in the frantic months since first contact, refined by military strategists from every major power, and approved with the understanding that using it meant accepting catastrophic losses. It was not a plan for victory. It was a plan for making sure the aliens understood what they were dealing with. On the moon, the small crew of Artemis Base 3 watched through their telescope as the alien ships approached. There were 53 vessels, each one massive beyond comprehension, moving through space with an elegance that human ships could never match. The base commander, a Chinese astronaut named Liu Wei, sent one final transmission to Earth. "We see them. They're beautiful. Tell my family I love them. Tell them we didn't surrender." Then Commander Liu and her crew of 12 put on their spacesuits, evacuated the base, and climbed into their emergency shuttle. They had no chance of escaping, but humanity did not abandon its own. They would try. High Arbiter Zekthar watched from the bridge of the flagship as the fleet surrounded Earth's moon. It was a small world, airless and dead, but it held symbolic value for the humans. They had landed on it. They had planted flags on it. They had claimed it as the first step in their expansion into space. Destroying it would show them how futile that expansion was. "Target the far side," Zekthar commanded. "Away from Earth. We do not want debris falling on the planet. This is a demonstration, not an attack." The fleet's weapons charged, drawing power from reactors that could power entire cities. Energy weapons that could carve through rock like water. The mathematics were simple. Focus enough energy on one point, and even a moon would crack. Commander Vale stood beside Zekthar, watching the displays. She had argued against this action. She had recommended more study, more caution, but she had been overruled. Now she could only watch and hope that her instincts were wrong. The weapons fired. Pure energy lanced across the void, striking the moon's far side with the force of 1,000 nuclear weapons. Rock vaporized instantly. The surface of the moon glowed white-hot. Shockwaves rippled through the lunar crust, and for a moment it seemed like the moon might actually shatter, but it held. Wounded. Scarred. With a glowing crater visible even from Earth, but intact. "Continue firing," Zekthar ordered. "Complete the demonstration." That was when everything went wrong. The Concordat fleet detected the launches from Earth at the same moment their sensors registered massive electromagnetic pulses. Human ships, primitive chemical rockets, were lifting off from every space-capable nation on the planet. Not just one or two. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. They rose from silos hidden in forests and deserts. They launched from submarines surfacing in the oceans. They shot up from mobile platforms that had been disguised as ordinary vehicles. And every single one of them was armed. "Evasive action," Vale shouted, but it was already too late. The first wave hit the outer ships of the Concordat fleet. Not missiles with conventional warheads. Not even nuclear weapons. Though those came later. These were simpler. Stupider. More brutal. They were kinetic kill vehicles. Lumps of depleted uranium and steel accelerated to orbital velocity. They had no guidance systems. They had no warheads. They were just mass and velocity. And when they hit the Concordat ships, they hit with the force of tactical nukes. Shields flared and held against the first impacts. But there were so many. Hundreds of projectiles swarming like angry insects. Too many to track. Too many to stop. The Concordat's defensive systems had been designed to intercept sophisticated weapons, not dumb chunks of metal moving at 20,000 miles per hour. Shields failed. Hull plating cracked, and the second wave arrived. These were nuclear-tipped missiles. Old Cold War relics that had been rotting in silos for decades. Humanity had pulled them from storage, refurbished them, and aimed them skyward. They detonated in the space between Earth and the Moon, creating electromagnetic pulses that disrupted sensors and communications, creating clouds of plasma and debris that obscured targeting systems, creating an environment where the Concordat's technological superiority meant nothing because they couldn't see what they were shooting at. "Return fire," Zekthar screamed. "Destroy them." But the Concordat fleet was in chaos. Ships collided with each other trying to avoid the debris fields. Communications were jammed by the electromagnetic interference. Targeting systems locked onto phantom contacts created by the nuclear detonations. And through it all, More human ships kept launching, kept firing, kept throwing everything they had at the aliens. Commander Vale grabbed a control station and tried to make sense of the tactical display. The humans were using their own planet as cover, launching from the far side where the Concordat couldn't easily target them. They were using the moon as a shield, hiding behind the celestial body they had just watched the aliens try to destroy. They were using debris fields from their own destroyed ships to create obstacles, and they were targeting the Concordat ships with terrifying precision. "How do they know where we are?" an officer shouted. "They're not targeting what they see," Vale realized with horror. "They're targeting gravitational anomalies, mass displacement. They can't see us, but they can detect our ship's effect on space-time. They're using mathematics, not sensors." It was brilliant. It was desperate. It was exactly the kind of insane tactic that a species facing extinction would develop, and it was working. The third wave was worse. Human ships, actual crewed vessels, accelerated toward the Concordat fleet on suicide trajectories. They were old space shuttles, repurposed satellites, civilian craft that had been militarized in the weeks since first contact. They broadcast messages as they came, final words from pilots who knew they weren't coming home. "For Earth, remember us. You picked the wrong species." The ships rammed into Concordat vessels, their hulls loaded with explosives, their crews dying in the instant of impact. Shields that could withstand energy weapons failed against the simple physics of mass and momentum. The Concordat had never encountered an enemy willing to die just to take a single ship with them. High Arbiter Zekthar stared at the displays in disbelief. His fleet had engaged in hundreds of pacification operations. He had overseen the integration of dozens of species. None of them had fought like this. None. None of them had been this willing to sacrifice themselves. "Casualty report," he demanded. The numbers scrolled across his display, and his mandibles went still. 17 ships destroyed. 23 damaged beyond combat capability. 40% of his fleet was gone. And the humans were still launching, still attacking, still dying by the thousands, just to make the Concordat bleed. "Sir, we're detecting weapons of mass destruction," an officer reported. "Chemical warheads, biological payloads. They're using weapons that have been banned by galactic law for millennia." Vale pushed forward to check the readings. The officer was right. The humans were throwing everything at them, including weapons that the Concordat had agreed were too horrific to use. Nerve agents, bioweapons designed to mutate and spread. Things that violated every treaty the Concordat had ever signed. "They don't care about our laws," Vale said quietly. "They don't care about acceptable warfare. They're fighting for survival, and there are no rules." On Earth, General Webb watched the battle unfold through every telescope and sensor humanity possessed. He saw the losses. He knew every name of every pilot who had volunteered for the suicide missions. He knew the cost of Protocol Pandora. And it was breaking his heart. But it was working. "Status of the fleet," he demanded. "We've lost approximately 60% of our launch capability," an officer reported. "But the alien fleet is in retreat. They're pulling back toward the outer system. Keep the pressure on. Don't let them regroup. Launch everything we have left." Dr. Sarah Chen stood beside Webb, tears streaming down her face as she watched young pilots die in the cold vacuum of space. "We're winning," she whispered. "My God, we're actually winning." "No," Webb said quietly. "We're not winning. We're just making them realize they can't win either. There's a difference." The battle continued for 7 more hours. 7 hours of chaos and death and desperate heroism. The humans lost over 2,000 ships and 15,000 personnel. But the Concordat lost something more valuable. They lost their certainty. They lost their assumption of easy victory. They lost their belief that humanity was just another primitive species to be catalogued and absorbed. When the Concordat fleet finally withdrew beyond the orbit of Mars, battered and bleeding, they left behind a message for High Command, a request for reinforcements, a warning that Earth was not what they had expected. A recommendation to revise all previous tactical assessments. On the flagship, High Arbiter Zekthar sat in his command chamber and reviewed the battle recordings. He watched human ships sacrifice themselves. He watched pilots ram their vessels into concordate hulls. He watched a species that should have surrendered fight with the desperation of cornered animals. They were supposed to submit, he said to no one in particular. The analysis said they would submit rather than face annihilation. Commander Vale entered the chamber, her armor still scorched from a near miss during the battle. The analysis was wrong, she said flatly. Humans don't think like other species. They don't calculate acceptable losses. They calculate maximum damage. They're not fighting to preserve their civilization. They're fighting to make sure we regret attacking it. Then we will bring more ships, Zekthar said. We will overwhelm them with numbers. We will lose, Vale interrupted. Maybe not this battle or the next, but eventually, because they have nothing to lose, and we have everything. They will trade 10,000 lives for one of our ships. They will poison their own planet before letting us take it intact. They will fight until every single one of them is dead, and they will smile while doing it because at least they died free. Zekthar's mandibles clicked with frustration. You sound like you admire them. I recognize them, Vale said. My species was like this once, before the Concordate conquered us. We fought. We lost. But we made them pay such a price that they still remember us. The humans are the same. They're showing us what we used to be. Then we will break them as we broke your species. Will we? Vale challenged. My world had 1 billion people. Earth has 8 billion. My world had primitive nuclear weapons. Earth has thousands of advanced nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons, and the willingness to use all of them. My world fought for 10 years. How long will Earth fight? 20 years? 50? How many ships will the Concordate sacrifice? How many of our worlds will we risk? 2. Zekthar had no answer. He turned away from Vale and stared at the display showing Earth, that blue and green marble that had cost him so much already. On Earth, in the command center of the Terran Defense Council, General Webb received reports from around the world. Celebrations in the streets. People cheering the victory over the aliens. Politicians giving speeches about human courage and determination. But Webb knew the truth. They had won a battle, not the war. The aliens would return with more ships, better tactics, and a determination to finish what they had started. Humanity had bloodied the Concordate's nose, but eventually, the Concordate would hit back. How long do we have? He asked his analysts. Unknown, sir. The alien fleet has withdrawn to the outer system. They're sending transmissions back to their home territory. We estimate it will take months for reinforcements to arrive, if they call for them. If, Webb laughed bitterly. After what we just did to them, they'll call for reinforcements. They'll call for everything they have. And next time, they won't underestimate us. Sarah Chen pulled up a display showing the current status of Earth's defenses. It was not encouraging. Most of their orbital assets were gone. Their missile stockpiles were depleted. Their space-capable personnel were exhausted or dead. They had shot their bolt. And if the aliens came back in force, humanity would have very little left to throw at them. We need more time, Sarah said. Time to rebuild. Time to develop new weapons. Time to prepare for the next battle. How do we buy time? Webb asked. Sarah looked at the display showing the alien fleet, battered but still powerful, waiting beyond Mars. She thought about everything humanity had learned from a century of science fiction. Every story about desperate last stands and impossible victories. Every tale of underdogs finding a way to triumph against overwhelming odds. And she remembered one common thread in all those stories. We make them afraid, she said quietly. We show them that attacking Earth isn't worth the cost. We threaten something they care about more than conquest. What could they possibly care about more than winning? an analyst asked. Sarah smiled. And it was a terrible smile. Survival. They care about survival. And it's time we show them that attacking Earth threatens their survival too. How? Webb demanded. We can barely defend our own planet. How do we threaten theirs? I have an idea, Sarah said. But you're not going to like it. Nobody's going to like it. It's insane. And desperate. And probably suicidal. Webb looked at the casualty reports, still scrolling across his displays. 15,000 dead. Thousands more wounded. Entire families who would never see their loved ones again. All because humanity had refused to bow. Tell me, he said. At this point, what's one more insane plan? And Dr. Sarah Chen began to explain how humanity would threaten the extinction of 847 civilizations. How a primitive species with barely 100 years of spaceflight would hold a gun to the galaxy's head. How Earth would become the one planet nobody dared to touch. It was insane. It was desperate. It was the most human plan ever conceived. And it just might work. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the assembled members of the Terran Defense Council and displayed her plan on the holographic projector. The room fell silent as they processed what they were seeing. When she finished, nobody spoke for a full minute. You want to build genocide machines, the Russian delegate finally said. Automated weapons designed to destroy entire planets. And you want to aim them at every alien homeworld in the Concordat. Yes, Sarah said simply. That's monstrous. The Chinese delegate protested. We would be threatening billions of innocent lives. Trillions. Across all their worlds. They threatened us first, Sarah countered. They came to our system with the explicit intention of conquering our planet and enslaving our people. We're just returning the favor. General Webb stepped forward, his face grim. Explain the technical details. How would this even work? Sarah pulled up a new set of diagrams. We call them relativistic kill vehicles, RKVs. The concept is simple. Take a ship, strip out everything except engines and basic guidance. Accelerate it to 90% the speed of light. Aim it at a planet. At that velocity, even a small ship hits with the force of multiple nuclear weapons. A large ship hits with enough force to cause an extinction-level event. We don't have faster-than-light travel, an analyst pointed out. It would take decades or centuries for these weapons to reach alien homeworlds. Exactly, Sarah said. That's the beauty of it. These aren't weapons for winning a war. They're weapons for revenge. If the Concordat destroys Earth, these RKVs will still be traveling through space, heading toward their worlds. They can't be recalled by us, because we'll be dead. They can't be intercepted because they're too fast and too small to target effectively. And they can't be negotiated with, because they're automated. She let that sink in. Then she continued. We put AI guidance systems on each RKV. Simple systems, nothing sophisticated. Just enough to make course corrections and identify the target planet. We hide them throughout the solar system, disguised as asteroids or debris. We make hundreds of them. Thousands. If we have time. And we program them to launch if they stop receiving a specific signal from Earth. Dead man's switch, Webb said quietly. If Earth dies, they all launch automatically. Yes. And we tell the Concordat exactly what we've done. We give them the coordinates of the target planets. We show them the math. We prove that we have the capability. And we make it very clear that if they attack Earth, their homeworlds will die decades later. Their children will die. Their grandchildren will die. Everyone they love will die. And there's nothing they can do to stop it. The European delegate stood up, her face pale. This is madness. This is threatening mutual destruction on a galactic scale. It's called deterrence, Webb said. We used the same principle during the Cold War. The United States and Soviet Union both had enough nuclear weapons to destroy each other many times over. Neither side attacked because both sides knew it would mean their own destruction. It kept the peace for 50 years. Until it nearly didn't, the delegate shot back. We came within minutes of nuclear war multiple times. One mistake, one misunderstanding, and the world could have ended. One mistake, RY. And yet it didn't, Webb said. Because when both sides have everything to lose, both sides find ways to avoid conflict. That's what we're offering the Concordat. A choice. Leave Earth alone, or watch their civilization die. How do we even build these weapons? The Indian delegate asked. We don't have the resources. We don't have the technology. Sarah pulled up another set of plans. We don't need sophisticated technology. That's the point. An RKV is just mass and velocity. We can use existing spacecraft designs, existing fusion drives that we've been developing for deep space exploration. We can use materials we already have. The hard part isn't building them. The hard part is accelerating them to the required speed, and that just takes time and energy. How much time? Webb asked. If we start now, using every space-capable facility on Earth, we can have the first batch ready in 6 months. A full deployment of several hundred RKVs will take about 2 years. We might not have 2 years, the Russian delegate said. The aliens could attack again, at any time. Then we bluff, Sarah said. We tell them we've already built the RKVs. We show them the launch sites. We give them just enough information to make them believe we're serious, and we pray they believe us before they attack again. The council debated for hours. Some members argued it was too dangerous, too immoral, too likely to backfire. Others argued it was humanity's only chance for survival. In the end, it came down to a simple question that Webb posed to the council. Would you rather die on your knees, or live with the knowledge that you threatened billions of innocent lives? The vote was called. It was not unanimous, but it passed. Operation Damocles was authorized. Across Earth, every space agency, every aerospace company, every university with engineering capability was mobilized. The best minds in physics and engineering were pulled into classified facilities and given a single task: build weapons that could kill planets. Resources were diverted from civilian projects. Satellites were cannibalized for parts. Experimental fusion drives were rushed into production, and every step of the way, humanity made sure the Concordat was watching. Aboard the Concordat flagship, analyst Kriath processed the latest intelligence from Earth with growing horror. The humans were not hiding their activities. They were broadcasting them, showing the galaxy exactly what they were building. High Arbiter, Kriath reported to Zekthar. The humans have begun construction of what they call relativistic kill vehicles. They claim these weapons will target Concordat homeworlds in the event of Earth's destruction. Zekthar's mandibles clicked with irritation. Threats. Empty threats. From a desperate species. They barely have the capability to reach their own moon reliably. How could they possibly threaten worlds dozens of light years away? The physics are sound, Kriath said reluctantly. A ship accelerated to relativistic speeds would indeed strike with catastrophic force. And the humans have published their mathematics. They're showing us exactly how they plan to do it. Commander Vale examined the human broadcasts with her tactical eye. She saw construction facilities on Earth's surface. She saw ships being assembled in orbit. She saw test firings of fusion drives. The humans were not bluffing. They were building exactly what they said they were building. How long until these weapons are operational? Vale asked. The humans claim 6 months for the first batch, Kriath replied. But that may be optimistic. Our analysts estimate 1 to 2 years for a full deployment. Then we attack now, Zekthar said. Before they complete their weapons. We bring in reinforcements and crush them. Before they can threaten us. That's what they want you to think, Vale said quietly. They're giving us a timeline. They're daring us to attack. Why? Zekthar turned his multiple eyes toward her. Explain. If they're really building these weapons, they would hide them. They would keep the construction secret, maintain the element of surprise. But they're broadcasting everything. They want us to know. They want us to see. Which means either they're bluffing and hoping to scare us, or they've already built them. Kriath finished the thought. This construction could be decoys. Misdirection. While we watch these facilities, the real weapons could already be hidden throughout their solar system. Zekthar was silent for a long moment. Then, he activated the fleet-wide communication system. Contact High Command. Request full intelligence analysis. I want to know if the humans have the capability to carry out this threat. The response came 3 days later. It was not what Zekthar wanted to hear. The Concordate's greatest scientists had analyzed the human threat. They had run the numbers, checked the physics, and examined the transmissions from Earth. Their conclusion was unanimous and terrifying. The humans could do it. They had the technology, the resources, and most importantly, the will. Humanity had proven in the first battle that they were willing to sacrifice thousands of lives for tactical advantage. Building automated weapons that would launch after their extinction was entirely consistent with their psychology. Probability assessment? Zekthar demanded. 65% probability that humans have already constructed at least some RKVs, the High Command analysis stated. 90% probability that they will complete construction within 2 years if left unimpeded. 99% probability that they will actually launch these weapons if Earth is destroyed. Zekthar read the final line of the report and felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. Recommended course of action. Immediate withdrawal from the Sol system. Establish communication channels for negotiation. Under no circumstances should Earth be attacked or threatened. The risk to Concordat homeworlds is unacceptable. This is capitulation, Zekthar said. We are allowing a primitive species to dictate terms to the greatest alliance in the galaxy. No, Vale said. We are recognizing that some victories cost more than they're worth. Walk away, or risk the destruction of everything we've built over millennia. That's not a hard choice, High Arbiter. But Zekthar would not accept it. He could not. He had overseen dozens of integration operations. He had never failed. He would not let a species barely capable of spaceflight be the first to defy the Concordat. Prepare the planet killer, he ordered. Full power. We will destroy Earth in one strike. So fast, they cannot launch their weapons. High Arbiter, I must protest. Vale began. You are dismissed, Commander. All of you. I will handle this personally. The bridge crew filed out, leaving Zekthar alone with his decision. He activated the flagship's main weapon, a device that could crack continental plates and boil oceans. It would take time to charge. Hours, perhaps a full day. But once fired, Earth would die before the humans could react. He would save the Concordat from this threat. He would restore order. And he would show the galaxy that defying the Concordat had consequences. Zekthar did not notice when Commander Vale returned to her quarters and opened a secure channel to her homeworld. He did not notice when she transmitted everything she knew about his plans to the other fleet commanders. And he did not notice when those commanders, horrified by what Zekthar intended to do, began making their own plans. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the control room at the new Cheyenne Mountain facility, monitoring the alien fleet. They had detected unusual energy signatures from the flagship. Something big was charging up. Get me General Webb, she said urgently. I think they're about to do something stupid. Webb arrived within minutes. What am I looking at? Energy buildup consistent with a large-scale weapon. If I'm reading this right, they're preparing to fire on Earth, and based on the power levels, it's going to be bad. How long do we have? 12 hours, maybe less. Webb picked up the phone that connected directly to the launch facilities scattered across Earth. This is Webb. Authorization code Alpha 993. Activate all RKVs. Set them to standby for immediate launch. If that ship fires, I want every weapon we have in space within seconds. "Sir," an officer said quietly, "we only have 30 RKVs completed. That's not enough to 170s. It doesn't matter how many we have," Webb interrupted. "What matters is that they believe we'll use them. Get them ready." Sarah pulled up another display. "General, I'm detecting something else. Multiple ships in the alien fleet are moving. They're positioning themselves between us and the flagship." "What?" Webb leaned closer to the display. "Are they protecting us?" "I think they're protecting themselves. If the flagship fires and we launch our RKVs in response, every alien in that fleet knows their homeworlds are doomed. They're trying to stop their own commander." Aboard the Concordat flagship, Zekthar watched with growing fury as his own fleet moved into positions that would block his shot at Earth. He opened communication channels and found them jammed. He tried to assert his authority and found his commands ignored. "This is mutiny," he said to the empty bridge. "This is treason against the Concordat." The door to the bridge opened. Commander Vale walked in, followed by security officers from a dozen different species. She looked at Zekthar with something like pity. "This is survival," she said. "We're not letting you doom our worlds for pride. I am High Arbiter. I command this fleet." "You commanded this fleet," Vale corrected. "But the other captains have voted. They're not willing to risk their homes for a planet that isn't worth the cost. Earth has proven it can hurt us, and more importantly, it has proven it will hurt us, even if it dies. That makes it not worth conquering. The Concordat will never accept this. The Concordat will do what it always does," Vale interrupted. "Calculate cost versus benefit, and Earth has made the cost unacceptable. You taught us that, High Arbiter. You taught us that some species aren't worth the trouble." Zekthar lunged at her, but the security officers restrained him. He struggled, his 8 legs thrashing, but they held him firm. "Take him to confinement," Vale ordered. "And send a message to Earth. Tell them we're ready to negotiate." On Earth, the message arrived just as General Webb was preparing to give the launch order. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood. "They're standing down," he said in disbelief. "They're offering to talk." Sarah Chen read the message over his shoulder. "They're scared. They believe we'll actually do it. They believe we'll kill billions of innocent people just to make sure they can't have Earth." "Would we?" Webb asked quietly. "If it came down to it, would we actually launch?" Sarah thought about that. She thought about the RKVs hidden throughout the solar system. Their AI systems waiting for a signal that would never come if humanity was smart. She thought about the alien worlds, with families and children and people just trying to live their lives. She thought about the cost of survival and the price of freedom. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'm glad we don't have to find out." Webb activated the communication system that would broadcast to every government on Earth. "This is General Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Council. The alien fleet has requested negotiations. They're standing down." The celebrations that erupted across Earth were heard even in space. But in the quiet control room, Webb and Sarah just stood together, exhausted and alive. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now," Webb said, "we find out if we can negotiate with 847 alien civilizations. We find out if they'll accept us as equals or keep trying to conquer us. And we keep building those RKVs, just in case. That's a terrible way to achieve peace. It's the only way we know," Webb said. "We're human. We don't know how to surrender. We only know how to make the alternative worse." In orbit, Commander Vale broadcast a message to the Concordat High Command. It was simple and direct. Earth has defended itself successfully. Integration is not possible at acceptable cost. Requesting permission to withdraw and establish non-aggression protocols. The response took 3 days. But when it came, it changed everything. Withdrawal approved. Begin negotiations for peaceful coexistence. And Commander Vale, congratulations on your promotion to High Arbiter. Don't make the same mistakes your predecessor did. Vale looked at Earth through the viewport of what was now her flagship. That blue and green world that had cost the Concordates so much. That species that had refused to bow. That terrifying, wonderful, insane collection of beings that called themselves human. I won't, she said to the empty bridge. I'll remember what they taught us. Some species are better left alone. Some spirits cannot be conquered, and some worlds are not worth the price of victory. 5 years had passed since the day Commander Vale became High Arbiter. 5 years since humanity held a gun to the galaxy's head and dared anyone to pull the trigger. 5 years since Earth proved that sometimes the weakest species could be the most dangerous. The Concordat had changed. Not overnight, and not without resistance. But it had changed. The great chamber where 847 civilizations once gathered to choose their next target now hosted a very different kind of meeting. Representatives from Concordat worlds sat in a circle, all equal, all with a voice. And among them, in a seat that had been added specifically for them, sat the human delegation. Dr. Sarah Chen, now Earth's ambassador to the Concordat, stood to address the assembly. She was older now, with gray streaking through her black hair. The stress of first contact and the years of negotiation that followed had aged her. But her eyes were still sharp, still alert for any sign that the galaxy might turn against humanity again. The Terran Republic submits its proposal for the establishment of a joint research initiative, Sarah said, her voice translated into hundreds of languages by the Chamber's systems. We believe that sharing defensive technologies will benefit all member species of the reformed Concordat. There was a time when such a proposal would have been laughed out of the chamber. Humans sharing technology with civilizations thousands of years more advanced? But that was before the Battle of Luna, before the RKVs, before everyone learned that sometimes the newest ideas came from the species with the least experience. A delegate from the Vrax Collective, the crystalline beings who perceived through light, spoke up. The humans wish to share defensive technologies, by which they mean weapons, by which they mean more ways to kill. No, Sarah corrected firmly. We mean ways to survive. There's a difference. Is there? The Vrax's internal light flickered with what might have been skepticism. Your species arrived in this chamber by threatening genocide. You maintain peace by promising mutual destruction. Everything humans touch becomes a weapon. Sarah did not flinch. She had heard variations of this argument dozens of times over the past 5 years. You're right. We do see the military application in everything. Do you know why? Because for 10,000 years, the only thing that kept humans alive was our ability to fight. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us. We survived ice ages, predators, diseases, and each other. We learned to turn rocks into spears, spears into guns, and guns into weapons that could end civilizations. Not because we're evil, because we're survivors. She paused, letting that sink in. Then she continued, and now we're offering to teach you what we learned. Because, like it or not, the galaxy is not as safe as you thought it was. The Concordat spent millennia conquering weaker species because you never faced a real challenge. You never had to fight for survival. But Earth showed you that there are species out there who will fight. Species who won't submit. Species who would rather die than bow. And if we exist, others might too. High Arbiter Vale stood from her seat. She was still angular and severe, but 5 years of leadership had added something to her bearing. Respect, perhaps, or weariness. Ambassador Chen is correct, Vale said. The Battle of Luna revealed weaknesses in Concordat military doctrine that we had not acknowledged. We were unprepared for an enemy willing to accept catastrophic losses. We were unprepared for asymmetric warfare. We were unprepared for desperation. The humans have offered to help us address these weaknesses. I recommend we accept. The vote was called. It passed. though not unanimously. Humanity's proposal for joint defense research was approved. It was a small thing, in the grand scheme of galactic politics. But it was another step toward Earth being seen not as a threat to be managed, but as a partner to be respected. After the session ended, Sarah found Vale waiting for her in one of the chamber's side rooms. The High Arbiter had requested a private meeting, which was unusual. In 5 years of negotiations, Vale had been professional but distant. She had never sought Sarah out alone. "Ambassador Chen," Vale said formally. "Of course, High Arbiter. What can I do for you?" Vale was silent for a moment, her red eyes studying Sarah's face. Then she spoke quietly. "I wanted to ask you something. Something that has bothered me since the Battle of Luna. Would you have done it? Would you have actually launched the RKVs?" Sarah had known this question would come eventually. She had asked herself the same thing hundreds of times. Every time she saw the launch facilities scattered across Earth, every time she reviewed the AI systems that waited patiently in the darkness, ready to commit genocide on command. "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "I'd like to think we would have found another way. I'd like to think that humanity wouldn't actually doom billions of innocent beings for revenge. But I also know what we did during the Battle of Luna. I know that 15,000 people died in a few hours, and every one of them volunteered. I know that humanity has imagined its own extinction so many times that we've become experts at surviving it. So, I don't know. But I'm very glad we never had to find out." "Agree. Every P. Your species frightens me," Vale said bluntly. "Not because you're strong. Many species are strong. But because you're unpredictable. You do things that should be impossible. You survive things that should kill you. And you do it with a smile. As if death is just another challenge to overcome. Is that why you promoted me to ambassador?" Sarah asked. "To keep an eye on the scary humans?" No," Vale said. "I promoted you because your species earned the right to be heard. Because you fought for your freedom and won. Because the galaxy needs to remember that there are things worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible." Vale turned toward the viewport that showed the stars beyond. "My species was conquered by the Concordat 300 years ago. We fought. We lost. We submitted. And for 3 centuries, we told ourselves we had made the right choice. That survival was better than extinction. That there was no shame in bowing to superior force. But then, we met humanity. And you didn't bow. You stood up and said no. And the entire galaxy had to readjust. We got lucky," Sarah said. "If you had pressed the attack, if your predecessor had been a little faster, a little more ruthless, Earth would be ash, perhaps. Or perhaps you would have found another way. That's what your species does, isn't it? Find ways to survive when survival should be impossible. It's why half the Concordat admires you and the other half wants you quarantined. You're a reminder of what we used to be. Warriors. Survivors. Species that fought for every inch of existence. And now?" Sarah asked. "What are you now?" "Bureaucrats," Vale said with something like sadness. "Administrators. We manage the galaxy like it's a corporate structure. We've forgotten what it means to fight for something that matters. You reminded us, and I'm not sure if I should thank you or curse you for it." A message chimed on Sarah's communication device. She glanced at it and smiled. "It's from General Webb. He's retiring from the Terran Defense Council. Says he's done enough fighting for one lifetime. He's a good warrior," Vale said. "I respect him. Even though he cost me 17 ships. He respects you too. He told me once that you were the only alien commander who understood what was at stake. The only one who realized Earth wasn't fighting to win, but fighting to make losing too expensive. I understood because my species made the same calculation once," Vale said. "We lost. But we made the Concordat remember us. Your species did better. You won. And now you're here, in this chamber, with a voice that cannot be ignored. That's worth celebrating. Sarah thought about the past 5 years. The endless negotiations, the cultural exchanges, the gradual acceptance of humanity into the galactic community. It had been hard work, exhausting work, but it had been worth it. What happens now? Sarah asked. Where do we go from here? Vale's mandibles clicked in what Sarah had learned was the equivalent of a smile. That's the question, isn't it? The Concordat is changing. Other species see what happened with Earth and wonder if they should have fought harder. If they should have said no when the Concordat came knocking. We're getting more resistance, more defiance. The easy days of expansion are over. Is that a good thing? I think so. A galaxy where everyone submits out of fear is not a stable galaxy. It's a powder keg waiting for a spark. Better to have difficult negotiations and hard-won peace than quiet obedience and hidden resentment. Your species taught us that. On Earth, in a small house in the suburbs of what used to be called Washington, D.C., General Marcus Webb sat on his porch and watched the sunset. He was retired now, officially. No more emergency calls at 3 in the morning. No more decisions that cost thousands of lives. No more watching young pilots fly into the void, knowing they wouldn't return. His wife brought him a glass of iced tea and sat beside him. You're thinking about them again, she said quietly. The ones who died. Always, Webb admitted. Every day, every sunset, I think about what they sacrificed, what they gave up so the rest of us could sit here and watch the sky without fear. They were heroes. They were desperate, Webb corrected. They were terrified kids who volunteered because someone had to. Because the alternative was slavery. We dress it up in medals and monuments, but the truth is uglier. We asked them to die, and they said yes. That's not heroism. That's tragedy, but it worked. It worked, Webb agreed. And I'll carry the weight of that for the rest of my life. We won because we were willing to pay a price the aliens weren't. We won because we're insane enough to threaten genocide as a defense strategy. We won because humanity has been preparing for extinction since the day we looked up at the stars and realized we were alone. We're not alone anymore. No, Webb said. We're not. And that's both wonderful and terrifying. Because now we have to figure out how to be part of this galaxy without losing what makes us human, without losing that stubborn refusal to bow, without losing the very insanity that saved us. His wife squeezed his hand. We'll figure it out. We always do. Croast. I hope so, Webb said, because the galaxy is watching us now. Every species that was conquered, every species that submitted, every species that bent the knee when the Concordat came knocking, they're all watching Earth, wondering if we'll stay free, wondering if it's possible to be part of this galactic community without giving up sovereignty. We've become a symbol. And symbols are dangerous things. At the new Cheyenne Mountain facility, deep underground, the control room still monitored the RKVs hidden throughout the solar system, 30 completed weapons, with hundreds more in various stages of construction. The construction had never stopped, even after the peace negotiations began. Because humanity had learned an important lesson. Peace through strength was not pretty. It was not moral. It was not what anyone wanted. But it worked. Dr. Sarah Chen had explained it to the Concordat Council once, during a heated debate about humanity's continued weapons development. You want us to disarm, she had said, to show good faith, to prove we're not a threat. But that's not how deterrence works. The moment we're no longer a threat is the moment some species decides we're worth conquering again. So we keep building. We keep preparing. We keep making sure that attacking Earth is always more expensive than leaving us alone. Not because we want to. Because we have to. The head technician of the RKV monitoring station was a young woman named Rachel Torres. She had been 15 during the Battle of Luna, had watched the sky light up with explosions and nuclear fire, had watched her older brother volunteer for the suicide missions and never come home. Now she sat in front of screens, showing weapons that could kill worlds, and she prayed every day that they would never be used. System status? She asked her assistant. All RKVs reporting green. AI systems functioning normally. No unauthorized access attempts. We're stable. Stable. That was the best word for Earth's situation. Not safe. Not secure. But stable. A balance of terror that kept everyone honest. A sword hanging over the galaxy's head, held in place by humanity's promise that they would drop it if pushed too far. Rachel thought about that sometimes, about what it meant to be the species that threatened genocide as a survival strategy, about what it said about humanity that they were willing to damn billions of souls for the crime of attacking Earth, about whether there was any moral difference between threatening mass murder and actually committing it. She didn't have good answers. She just had her duty. Monitor the weapons. Maintain the systems. Hope they were never needed. In the galactic community, humanity had become known as something unique. Not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the most advanced, but the most dangerous. The species that fought like cornered animals. The species that would burn the galaxy down rather than submit. The species that looked extinction in the face and laughed. And slowly, grudgingly, that reputation was turning into respect. Other species started requesting human military advisors. Not because humans had superior weapons, but because humans thought about warfare differently. They anticipated worst-case scenarios. They planned for the impossible. They found tactical solutions that more civilized species would never consider. Humanity became the galaxy's nightmare insurance policy. The species everyone hoped they'd never need, but were grateful existed. 5 years after first contact, the Terran Republic had treaties with 47 different species, trade agreements, cultural exchanges, military cooperation pacts. Earth had gone from being marked for conquest to being a respected, if feared, member of the galactic community. But the RKVs remained, hidden, armed, waiting. On the anniversary of the Battle of Luna, Sarah Chen stood at the memorial erected on the moon's surface, near the crater that the Concordate's weapons had carved. 15,000 names were inscribed on the black granite wall, glowing softly in the harsh sunlight. 15,000 people who had died so that billions could live free. Vale stood beside her. The High Arbiter had made the journey to Earth specifically for this ceremony. An unprecedented gesture. We remember them, Vale said quietly. All of us. Every species in the Concordat knows what happened here. Knows what your people sacrificed. Do they understand why? Sarah asked. Some do. Others think humanity is insane, dangerous, too unpredictable to be trusted. But they all respect what happened here. They all know that there are species who will fight, who will not submit, who will make victory cost more than it's worth. Your dead taught the galaxy that lesson. Sarah traced her finger over one name on the wall, Lieutenant Marcus Chen. Her nephew. 23 years old when he volunteered for the suicide squadrons. She had tried to stop him, had begged him not to go. He had smiled and said someone had to. Someone, always, had to. They shouldn't have had to, Sarah said. We should have found another way. There was no other way, Vale said. The Concordat would not have stopped, would not have negotiated, would not have listened. Your people did what was necessary, and they saved not just Earth, but the entire structure of galactic civilization. Because after Luna, we couldn't go back to the old ways. We couldn't just conquer and expand. We had to change. Was it worth the cost? Vale looked at the names on the wall. 15,000 individuals, each with their own dreams and hopes and futures, all sacrificed in a few hours of desperate combat. Ask me in 100 years, she said. Ask me when we see what kind of galaxy we've built with the peace they died for. Ask me when we know whether humanity's defiance created something better or just delayed the inevitable. But right now, today, I think they would be proud. That has to count for something. They stood together in silence, human and alien, former enemies now standing in respect for the dead. And above them, in the darkness beyond the moon, the RKVs waited, silent guardians of a peace built on the promise of mutual destruction. Humanity had joined the galaxy, but on their own terms, with their sovereignty intact, with their freedom preserved, and with the clear understanding that anyone who threatened Earth would pay a price measured in generations. They had become the species the galaxy learned to fear, and in doing so, they had earned the right to live. Sarah Chen thought about the future as she stood at the memorial. About what humanity would become in the centuries ahead. About whether they could maintain their independence while being part of something larger. About whether the weapons they had built to save themselves would eventually destroy them. She didn't know. Nobody knew. But that was okay. Humans had never known what the future held. They had just faced it anyway, with courage and stubbornness, and an absolute refusal to surrender. The stars learned to fear us, Sarah said quietly, remembering the words someone had spoken years ago. Yes, Vale agreed. And now we must all learn to live with that fear. Humans and aliens alike. We must build a civilization where strength doesn't mean conquest, where being dangerous doesn't mean being evil, where species can be both powerful and peaceful. Can we do that? Sarah asked. Can the galaxy change that much? Vale's mandibles clicked with something that might have been hope. 5 years ago, I would have said no. But 5 years ago, I didn't believe a primitive species could stand up to the Concordat. I didn't believe desperate courage could triumph over overwhelming force. I didn't believe one planet could change the galaxy. I was wrong about all of it. So maybe I'm wrong about this too. Maybe we can build something better. Sarah looked up at the Earth, hanging blue and green in the lunar sky. Home. The world that refused to bow. The planet that changed everything. For their sake, Sarah said, gesturing to the memorial. I hope we can. Well, I hope we can. For everyone's sake. Vale corrected. Because if we can't, if this peace fails, the next war will be different. Species across the galaxy now know that humans will fight, but they also know that others might fight too. The age of easy conquest is over. The next war will be the last war. Total. Final. Mutual destruction on a scale that makes your RKVs look merciful. Then we make sure there is no next war, Sarah said firmly. Agreed. And that is why you and I must work together. Human and Concordat. Former enemies, now partners. Building something new from the ashes of the old. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is, Sarah said. They turned away from the memorial and walked back toward the shuttle that would carry them to the diplomatic station in orbit. Behind them, the names of 15,000 heroes glowed in the sunlight, a permanent reminder of the price of freedom, and far beyond the moon, in the darkness between stars, the galaxy continued its ancient dance. But it had changed. Because one species had said no. One planet had refused to submit. One desperate people had made the galaxy remember what it meant to fight for something that mattered. Earth had been marked as the next target. But one transmission had changed everything. Not a plea for mercy. Not a cry for help. Just a simple promise. You have made a terrible mistake. And the stars themselves had learned to listen.